Good morning, everyone. Well, writing resumes, CVs, is a very important skill in life, isn't it? But it's something that I am terribly bad at. When I was 18, I applied for a job at McDonald's at Crown Casino. I don't know what I was thinking. Anyways, I had to write a resume, and I wrote 2 pages about how wonderful I was and why it was in their best interest to hire me. I wrote that I was the best team player. My communication skills are beyond anything you might have seen. I've got a burning passion for the hospitality industry and McDonald's. And by the way, yes, I am very humble as well. Well, of course, most of what I wrote was far-fetched, not totally true. But somehow or other, I got the job. Maybe the HR team was looking for someone good at blowing his own trumpet. As you might imagine, unlike this HR team, God has quite different criteria. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are before God on the day of judgment. And God asks you, write me a CV for why I should let you into heaven. I wonder, what would you write? What would you include? And what would you exclude? Let's keep this question on the back burner as we come to today's parable. In our parable today, there are basically 2 different CVs before God. Verse 10, 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. 2 CVs, 2 different outcomes, one that leads to heaven, another that leads to hell. Now let's take a look at their CVs briefly. Firstly, the Pharisee. Verse 11, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a 10th of all I get. Seems like a solid CV. He is what we might call today a good man. The Pharisees get a bad reputation. They are generally seen as the Darth Vaders of the Bible. But morally, they were better than most of us. They put most of us to shame. Look what he can say about himself. He says, I'm not a robber, evildoer, or adulterer. Now there is no doubt that he's telling the truth. He probably didn't steal, wasn't an evildoer, he didn't cheat on his wife. Surely we need more people like that. Imagine yourself walking down Flinders Street late at night. You sense that there is someone behind you and you're worried that someone might grab your handbag. But you look around and you see, there is a Pharisee there. You will feel totally safe. He will never dream of snatching your handbag. He is no thief, you see. When I used to work at St. Paul's Cathedral, people were asked to keep their belongings near them because there were a lot of thieves around. I remember one day a purse was stolen from an elderly couple. You can understand, as they went home, they might have said to one another, I wish there were more Pharisees in that place. Well, governments, police, and other law enforcement agencies interested in crime statistics would all like to see more Pharisees around. That would surely bring a nosedive to crime. I'm not like other people, he says, robbers, evildoers, adulterers. We are surrounded by adulterous culture, aren't we? From Married at First Sight to Game of Thrones, they sell to us an adulterous vision of life. It is no wonder that statistics tell us that faithfulness in marriage has taken a huge hit and extramarital affairs are thriving under these conditions. Now, if someone's home has been wrecked by adultery, I can totally understand if they were to say, "Oh, I wish I had married a Pharisee. He will never dare to cheat. So Pharisees, yes, they have a bad reputation, but every society needs them. But not just the society, you see, the church as well. Look at verse 12. I fast twice a week, he says, and give a tenth of all I get. You see, the Old Testament law required that people should fast once a year. But Pharisee, he fasted twice a week. The Old Testament law required tenth of certain things. But Pharisee gave tenth of everything, right down to garden herbs. If you ask church treasurers, they will tell you we need more Pharisees. The point I'm making is that Pharisees have a bad reputation, but unlike us, they were no nominal believers. No, they were so gripped by their religion that it impacted their stomach as well as their wallet. They weren't, I come to church on Sunday and forget about God Monday to Friday. No, every day was devoted to God for Pharisees. So as you can see, the Pharisee's CV looks very solid. And you would think that he has all the credentials and that God would say to him, come Pharisee, you've got the job, here's your green card to heaven. But of course, none of that happens. Instead, God puts his CV in the shredder, as it were. Verse 14. I tell you that this man, that is, the tax collector, rather than the other, went home justified before God. The shock of the story, the punchline, is that the Pharisee, despite all his good works and moral living, is not acceptable to God. I've been to many funerals where people often say, oh, he was a good man. Look at all his charity. He loved his wife. He was devoted to his children. Look at his works for the community or the church. Surely he is in heaven. Well, I can understand the sentiment, but that's not necessarily true. Just because you have done good works doesn't necessarily mean you will end up in heaven. You can have all the good works in the world and still end up in hell, just like this Pharisee. When I was a Muslim, I used to think that if I have enough good works on my CV, God would be under obligation to send me to heaven. But this parable tells us clearly, if this Pharisee, who was much more righteous in good works than all of us, if he can end up in hell, why do you think that your good works can save you? Let's think about what the problem is. Why did God reject the Pharisee? The devil is in the details, so let's look at the details. The problem is not that the Pharisee is righteous, but self-righteous. He has a high view of himself. He thinks of himself as worthy. While the tax collector stood at a distance, the Pharisee stood by himself at the front. And his prayer just gives it away. He is praying publicly before others, but there is no petition there. No, God help me, I'm a sinner. It begins by a nod to God, but then it's all about me and my good works. His prayer is really a self-congratulatory speech, self-absorbed. There are 4 uses of the pronoun I. God, I thank you that I am not like other people. Robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get. In his prayer, he brags, but also he drags the tax collector in the dirt to draw attention to his own Mr. Cleanness. There's no God, help me to love you and others, no prayer for compassion for the tax collector, just a grocery list of his good works. I. And the message is absolutely clear. Those who trust in themselves will be rejected. All CVs that mention self-righteous works will be shredded before God. So his problem is that he is self-absorbed, self-righteous, and God will not have a bar of that. So the Pharisee. Now let's turn to the tax collector and his CV. Tax collectors were seen as the scum of Jewish society. They were seen as traitors who were sold out to the enemy. They were the ones that did the dirty job of collecting the tax for the Roman Empire and often would extort their own people. You wouldn't find any respectable Jews in the company of these wretches. In fact, they were considered outcasts, untouchables. Society looked down on them so much so that they were not allowed to give testimony in court. One writer points out that in today's culture, the closest equivalent would be drug pushers and pimps, those who prey on society, who make money off others' bodies, and make a living off stealing from others. If the Pharisee was full of morality, this guy doesn't have a trace of it. But he comes to the temple to pray. Verse 13. But the tax collector stood at a distance. You can sense that he is uncomfortable in the temple, probably doesn't know his way around. He doesn't even consider himself worthy to enter the sanctuary, probably looking around at the Pharisees and thinking that he is not in the same league spiritually. Well, unlike the Pharisee who stood at the front and kept his head up in the sky, the tax collector's head is down. Tears in his eyes probably. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You will find only two things on the tax collector's CV. Written in big bold letters, God, have mercy on me, a sinner, and tears that wet the paper. He beats his breast, which shows that he is full of grief over his sin. He doesn't feel that he has to give the grocery list of good works that he might have done. He doesn't say, oh, look at me, Mr. Cleanness, everybody. No, he knows that he's a dirty sinner who needs God's cleansing grace. He knows that nothing else will do except for the mercy of God. So he prays the prayer of dependence, desperation. His only hope is in the mercy, not merit. The Pharisee gives 6 reasons why God should let him in, and this guy just gives one, that is, he is a sinner. And the Lord says, verse 14, I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who are humble themselves will be exalted. The point of the whole parable is that those who are self-righteous, who trust in their own goodness, those who trust in their own good works will be put to shame. And those who know that they are sinners and they have absolutely no right to enter heaven will enter it when they cry out for God's mercy. The only way you can enter heaven is on your knees. Those who say, have mercy on me, a sinner. People who rely on, look at my big donations to the church, look at my moral life, look how good I am, will never enter heaven. Only those who can say with St. Paul, I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I don't know if you know much about Habsburg emperors. They were all buried in the vault of a local monastery in Vienna. When the time for the funeral of Emperor Franz Joseph came in 1916, the funeral procession that was carrying his coffin stopped outside the gates of the monastery. The herald, on behalf of the dead emperor, began knocking at the huge doors. And the abbot from inside the monastery called out, who is knocking? And the herald replied, I am Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria, King of Hungary. I don't know you, shouted the abbot. Tell me again who you are. And off we go again. I'm Franz Joseph, Emperor of Austria, King of Hungary, Bohemia, Galicia, Grand Duke of Transylvania, Moravia. We still don't know who you are, interrupted the abbot. And at this point, the herald fell on his knees in front of a massive funeral party and people of Austria and said this: I'm Franz Joseph, a poor sinner, humbly begging for God's mercy. Enter then, the abbot replied, and the gates of the monastery were flung wide open. Of course, all this was planned by Franz Joseph himself before he died, because he wanted his subjects to understand the heart of the Christian faith, the heart of this parable, that only way the gates of heaven open to us is when you come to God on your knees. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This parable ends with both the tax collector and the Pharisee going home. One justified, right with God, destined for heaven. Another unjustified, not right with God, on the way to hell. We'll all go home today. Some justified, right with God, some not. And my deepest longing is that there will be none who will go home like the Pharisee, unjustified. And for that to happen, we all need to come earnestly to Christ in prayer, beating our breasts, as it were, acknowledging our sins and praying the prayer that the tax collector prayed. Would you pray with me now? God, have mercy on me, a sinner.